Alright, on to video number 4, westward expansion, land policies, technological growth, Native American removal. Alright, let's get on it. So, westward expansion had a lot to do with growth in Georgia. Socially, economically, with technology. Everything was growing in Georgia. Everything was becoming bigger and better. So, first off, we had 5 capitals in Georgia. Today our capital is Atlanta, but our first capital was Savannah. Remember what we used? Salma. Savannah, Augusta, Louisville, Milledgeville, and Atlanta. Savannah was our first capital. During the American Revolution, Savannah and Augusta acted as rotating capitals. Basically, it was about the push and pull between the Patriots and the Loyalists or Tories. Who was in control? Great Britain or the rebels? The battles between the Patriots and the Loyalists had a lot to do with why the capital kept switching between Savannah and Augusta. When the battles subsided, when the war was over, people start moving out westward. Our capital is going to change to Louisville, which was named after King Louis of France. The French helped the Patriots out a lot during the American Revolution. Louisville was also home to the burning of the Yazoo Land Act. Then there was a malaria outbreak, and the capital ended up moving again, this time to Milledgeville. Now, Milledgeville was a very successful capital. Unfortunately, Milledgeville was devastated during Sherman's March to the Sea in the Civil War. So, after the Civil War, Atlanta became our capital once it was rebuilt. But Milledgeville served as our capital for a very long time, and Milledgeville, this is very important, by the way, but it won't be on your test, is also home of your great science teacher, Miss Hood. Now, Atlanta, like I said, became the capital after it was rebuilt, after it was destroyed during the Civil War. So even though there were a lot of political things happening in Atlanta during the Civil War, it did not officially become our capital until after the war was over. Alright, UGA. University of Georgia was established in part by Abraham Baldwin. There's a statue of him here in the middle. Not only was he a signer of the U.S. Constitution along with William Few, he was also one of the people who helped charter the University of Georgia. He was the first president of UGA, and the reason why UGA was created was to give lower income people a chance at an education. Before this, universities were all for rich people. Private education for those who could afford it. UGA, though, was a public university. Now, anybody and everybody can have a chance to become well-educated. Alright, so moving on. As people start moving westward, well, they have to have a way to move westward. So, you have land policies. The first one, if you look at the map that says headright land grants, shows you the land that was granted through the headright system. Now, the headright system gave land to those who were the head of a household, people who were men. You had to be male, you had to be 21 years or older, you had to own property, and most of the people who received land with these headright land grants were people who were part of the American Revolution. Now that map shows you the land grants from 54 to 74, but if you look at the map in the middle, it shows you the headright land grants also after the war was over. Remember, the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783, but you can see that headright system lasted until 1803. Headright system was not seen as completely fair, though, since you had to be pretty well established in order to receive land. What about people who were single? What about people who really didn't have much, but needed that chance to start a new life and to move westward? What's the point of taking over all this land from the Native Americans if you're not going to let people live there? So they had the land lotteries. Land lotteries went from about 1805 to 1832, as you can see in the map in the middle. As we had more Native American land ceded to Georgia, ceded means given up, land lotteries were put in place to give away that land. A land lottery is just what it sounds like, is a lottery for land. A lottery is when you buy a chance to win something. So you could purchase a chance to win land. Land lottery, however, you didn't really know where your plot of land was going to be. If you had more than one chance to win land, and let's say you won 3 plots of land, well, they might be in 3 completely different places. So even though it was a more equal system, a system that was more fair as far as giving out land, it was a little bit more unpredictable. But it did give out all the land that was taken from Native Americans. And then we have the Yazoo Land Fraud Act. Alright, so the picture on this slide, which you guys remember, I'm sure, from that activity we did in class, is the burning of the Yazoo Land Act in Louisville. Why would they want to burn it? Well, because it was a scandal. 4 land companies are going to bribe the Georgia government for cheap land, and in return, they would sell them some of the land back at very cheap prices. Well, this was a behind-the-doors type of deal. It was bribery. Bribery is illegal. Governments cannot have bribes in order to pass any type of laws or to create any acts that would be in the favor of the person who's bribing them. You can't do that. It'd be like if you guys were like, hey, Miss Grimes, I know you like chocolate, right? So I got you this bag of Hershey Kisses, and you're going to make my grade better. No, that's not going to work. Now, if you want to get me some Hershey's just because you like me and you think I'm a cool person, that's great. But I'm not going to change your grade because of it, because that's wrong. Bribery is wrong. Well, when the people find out about this wrong thing that happened, this scandal, they were mad. They protested, and eventually they're going to vote all of these legislators out of office. They're out of office, and then when the U.S. government gets involved, it gets even worse. We had a lot of land that was considered a part of Georgia. Land that would later become Alabama and Mississippi. And that land that later became Alabama and Mississippi was given back to the U.S. government, ceded from Georgia to the U.S. government because of this scandal. Because of the Yazoo Land Act, we lost that land. Now imagine the impact of that. Imagine if we were the size of Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. There was no Alabama or Mississippi. Think about football. No University of Alabama. UGA would really have no competition anymore, right? So, this was a big deal. We lost a lot of revenue and resources from losing that land. Alright, if you have more questions about those land policies, make sure you ask me. The Yazoo Land Act is really the only one that's really confusing. And also look at your study guide that we did in class. Okay, moving on to advancements in technology, cotton gin and the railroads. The big thing about both of these is it increased cotton production and it increased slavery. The cotton gin is going to separate the seeds of the cotton from the fiber. Slaves were forced to do this by hand. And it was horrible, horrible, tedious work that would usually result in blisters and their hands bleeding because cotton doesn't start soft and fluffy. There's little thorns in there. And when you're separating the seeds, it's really sticky. Well, the cotton gin makes that part of it easier. Because of that, a lot of people think, oh, it must have lessened slavery, but no. Because the cotton gin increased cotton production, it's going to also increase slavery. You can see by the chart on this slide how many slaves there were between 1800 and 1860. 900,000 slaves in 1800, 4 million slaves in 1860. And a lot of that has to do with the cotton gin. Now, railroads impacted Georgia's growth because it helped create new cities and towns. Atlanta, for instance, was a railroad hub. It was a train stop, basically. But it also increased cotton production and trade and commerce in general. If you have railroads, you're going to move a lot more product. So the cotton gin and railroads both boosted our economy by creating more cotton production in the South and in Georgia. Alright. Native Americans. So, we all know that Native Americans were removed from Georgia. There were 2 major Native American groups, or tribes. We have the Creek Indians and the Cherokee. Now, the Creek. This man on this slide is William McIntosh. He was the chief of the Creek people. What was his role in the removal of the Creek? Well, he kind of betrayed all of his people. Not kind of, he did. He signed something called the Treaty of Indian Springs, which gave away the rest of the Cherokee Indian land. When the people of the Creek, I just said all that wrong, gave away the Creek land. I'm tired, forgive me. So William McIntosh signed the Treaty of Indian Springs, which gave away the rest of the Creek land. When the Creek people found out, they saw this as the ultimate betrayal, and they assassinated him. He was shot and stabbed repeatedly and killed by his own people. When William McIntosh agreed to sign away the rest of the Creek land, that land was then given to Georgia and most of it was given away in land lotteries, although some of it was also given away under the headright system. Alright, and then the Cherokee. The events with the Cherokee are a lot more confusing and a lot more in-depth. You can see that from this slide, the pictures and also the standard at the top. So first off, the Cherokee were led by John Ross. John Ross was a chief that was mild but firm. He was strong. He fought for his people. He fought against Cherokee removal. He negotiated with the government to try to find compromises so his people could stay. He was all about compromise. He wanted his people to assimilate. That means adapt to European culture. If you can see a picture of that house from New Echota, a replica of what New Echota, the capital of the Cherokee people, looked like in North Georgia, you can see by the clothes he's wearing that the Cherokee people did copy, assimilate, adapt a lot of European culture. And also other Cherokee leaders, such as Sequoyah, who's the man in the middle with the alphabet that he's holding. Sequoyah created the syllabary. The syllabary was a Cherokee alphabet. They had a newspaper called the Cherokee Phoenix. They had schools teaching Cherokee how to speak both Cherokee and English. They were really trying to find all the ways they could to have peace between the white settlers and the Cherokee so they could stay in their homes, stay on their land. But a few events impacted Cherokee removal. One, the Dahlonega Gold Rush. Dahlonega is a city in North Georgia, and gold was found there. When gold was found, white settlers wanted the Cherokees to leave so they could have the gold. So that did have an impact on the push for Cherokee removal. The other event was Worcester versus Georgia. This was a court case. Samuel Worcester and a few other ministers went to the Cherokee Nation, and they were allowed to be there by the Cherokee. And the Georgia government said, no, you can't do that. You can't be on Cherokee land unless you have a license from us. So they were arrested and put in labor camps at the capital. At this time it was in Milledgeville. And the Cherokee people helped hire attorneys to fight on behalf of Samuel Worcester and the other ministers. They went to the U.S. Supreme Court, where Chief Justice John Marshall said, no, Georgia, you can't do that. The Cherokee Nation is sovereign. That means that they have control over their own nation, their own people. They don't have to follow the rules of the U.S. government or the Georgia government. You can't tell the Cherokee what to do. That is their home, that is their land, this is their government. Unfortunately, President Andrew Jackson did not adhere to the Supreme Court ruling, which is unconstitutional, by the way, refused to enforce it, and the Cherokee were removed from their homes on something called the Trail of Tears. We all know about the Trail of Tears. John Ross, though, being the leader that he was, even though he could have had a deal where he wouldn't have to participate in the Trail of Tears, did march with his people the thousands of miles to Oklahoma, where thousands of Native Americans died, including his wife. So the Cherokee story is pretty heartbreaking. They tried so hard to maintain peace, even though it was their land. They were willing to compromise and assimilate to the culture so that they could all live together, but unfortunately it didn't work. And the Cherokee were forced from their lands, and their land was given away in land lotteries. Alright, so next we're going to move on to the causes of the Civil War and the last video that I'm going to have. So, move on to video number 5.